Hi there, Stage 3. I'm Kelly Rimmer, better known as Max's mum. When I'm not driving Max to school or yelling at him about his iPad time, I am a novelist. I've written 12 books in a bunch of different genres, but my favourite type of story to write is historical fiction. I understand you're about to embark on your own historical fiction creative writing project, so I wanted to give you a few tips based on my experience. One of the first things I do when I start writing historical fiction is to draw a timeline. It will go from roughly when I think my story is going to start to when I think it's going to end. And on that timeline, I like to put all of the, big, important historic events that took place in the world or in the region of my story out on the timeline so that as I plan my plot, I can see how those events would impact my characters or how my characters might have been involved in those events. You can also, when you're doing that kind of general reading about the era, note down any really interesting facts that you find that you might want to weave into the detail of your story. Once you've got that kind of general research done, you can start to plan out what actually happens in the story. And there will be a beginning, a middle, and an end to your story. And the action and the tension in your story will rise, and then it will reach a climax, and then it will fade. And so you can graph that out on the timeline. And so you can kind of line up, key moments in your story with key points in history. Something I find really useful no matter what kind of story I'm writing is to imagine each scene vividly before I start writing. And that's because I want to make sure, first of all, that I know as the author, that I know what's going to happen in the scene, that I can see it in my mind's eye so that I can describe it to my reader, but also to be sure that that scene is going to drive the action in my story forward. You don't want any scenes taking place in your book that don't give the reader some new piece of information or make something happen that will, move the story towards its conclusion. So for me, what's really useful is daydreaming while I walk the dogs, or while I'm doing the dishes, or even when I'm going to sleep at night. Sometimes I'll just run through the story in my head and I try and make the pictures in my mind as vivid as I can get them. I also really like to research fine points of detail for my historic fiction. And this is something that will give your story an air of real authenticity. So your reader will feel like they've been transported back to the 1800s. So it might be you ask yourself, what kind of food would my character have been eating and what would that have tasted like so I can describe it for my reader? Or what clothing would they have been wearing and would it have been rough to the touch or soft or dirty or smelly? These sensory things that you describe can be really, really impacting on your reader because it helps them to imagine themselves in the shoes of your character. Finally, I just wanted to say, sometimes we can get really intimidated by the idea of taking on a creative writing project. Maybe you think you're not good at spelling, or maybe your handwriting's atrocious, like mine is really bad. Maybe you're not great at grammar or punctuation confuses you. But every human that communicates has an innate ability to tell a story. So you know how to tell stories. You do it all day long. You tell your mum about your day at school, or you might meet your friends at the gate when they're being dropped off to kiss and drop, and you might tell them about your weekend. We're telling stories all the time. You do know how to do this. It's just a case of imagining the story in your mind and then putting it down on paper. So my advice is, with your first few drafts, don't get caught up in clever language or, clever metaphors or getting the punctuation or spelling or grammar right. Just tell the story, and then as you revise and edit and refine it, you can polish up all those other things later. Very best of luck, Stage 3, and I hope at some point I get to read some of your stories. Bye-bye.